Welcome, everybody. Thank you so much for coming. We're just going to wait a couple of minutes here for the room to fill up a little bit more, and then we will go ahead and get started. Hello, everybody. Just sit tight for a couple more minutes. We're going to wait for a few more people to join us. Thank you so much for coming. All right, well, let's go ahead and get started, and we'll have some people, probably some more people enter the room here as we get started. But thank you so much, everybody, for tuning in. We are so delighted, as always, to have you with us this evening. My name is Amy Ellison, and I'm the exhibition curator at the Los Altos History Museum. The Los Altos History Museum respectfully acknowledges the Muwekma Ohlone people on whose ancestral lands the museum sits. The Muwekma people have stewarded this land throughout the generations, and their historical relationship with the land continues to this day. Tonight's webinar, What is Citizen Science?, is being offered in connection with our current exhibition, Beauty and the Beast, California Wildflowers and Climate Change. The exhibition features the stunning photography of Rob Badger and Nita Winter, and it will be on display in our main gallery through July 11th. We are currently open to the public Fridays through Sundays from 12 to 4, with safety protocols in place. So we hope that if you haven't seen it yet, we hope that you'll come out and visit us soon. We are able to offer free admission to exhibitions like Beauty and the Beast and free programs like this webinar because of our amazing members and donors. So if you would like to become a museum member, please visit our website at losaltoshistory.org and learn about the perks and benefits that come with your membership. So just before I introduce our wonderful speaker tonight, just a couple of quick housekeeping items. This webinar is being recorded, so if you want to watch it again or you want to pass it along to friends who couldn't join live tonight, the recording will be made available on our website soon. And you can also see on our website recordings of previous programs that we've offered this year and last year as well. I also want to encourage everybody to please use the Q&A feature at the bottom of your screen. You can use that throughout the talk tonight. Please don't feel like you have to wait till the end. If a question pops into your head, please go ahead and type it in there. We will wait until the end to answer questions. After the talk, we'll have some time for that, and so we'll get to as many as we can. So without any further ado, it is my absolute pleasure to introduce Mary Ellen Hannibal, our speaker today. Mary Ellen Hannibal is an award-winning author and avid citizen scientist from the Bay Area. Her work focuses on natural history and the important connections between people, species, and ecosystems. She has written several books, her most recent being Citizen Scientist, Searching for Heroes and Hope in an Age of Extinction, which was named one of the best titles of 2016 by the San Francisco Chronicle. Mary Ellen's work has also appeared in the New York Times, Science, Anthropocene, Nautilus, Bay Nature, and many other publications. She has given TED and TEDx talks on citizen science and the endangered monarch butterfly, and she also teaches classes at the California College of the Arts. Mary Ellen's work on citizen science was integral to the creation of Beauty and the Beast, the exhibit currently on display at the museum. Her research inspired the photographers Rob Badger and Nita Winter as they developed the exhibition. And there's a section in the gallery on citizen science that is directly inspired by her work and her writings. Rob and Nita also put together a wonderful book that serves as a companion to the exhibit. And that book includes an essay by Mary Ellen on citizen science. That book, as well as Citizen Scientist, Searching for Heroes and Hope in an Age of Extinction, are both for sale at the museum gift shop. So Mary Ellen, as somebody whose work on citizen science is so important and is more important, getting more important every single day, it just really means so much to us that you could be here with us tonight, and on Earth Day, no less. I can't think of anyone I'd rather spend Earth Day with. So thank you so much for being here, and I'll let you take it away.
Thank you so much, Amy. And I am absolutely pleased as punch to be here and to be talking with the Los Altos History Museum, and especially in conjunction with Nita and Rob's book, which is just a gorgeous, gorgeous book and full of really interesting and very informative essays. I wrote an essay on citizen science in it, but they've got, a whole panoply of a lot of information about plants and evolution and all kinds of things. So citizen science, I'm going to go back a couple of books just briefly, because citizen science is essentially, it's regular people without a PhD contributing to scientific research. At the moment, it's booming, luckily, and turbocharged by smartphone technology, but it is a very ancient practice. This cover is from a book I published in 2009, which was made in honor of Darwin's birthday and the anniversary of On the Origin of Species, and is a collaboration with the photographer Susan Middleton. And so all of her photographs are of specimens from the California Academy of Sciences. Like all natural history museums, the Academy was basically founded by amateurs, by people who were not trained as scientists in the natural sciences. The Academy was actually founded a lot by a bunch of doctors, but they were avid collectors of natural history, and they sought to understand how life works by looking at its forms. These are Muir eggs. And, here in the Bay Area, we can look out on a clear day if we're hiking sometimes and see those Farallon Islands, and they are so rocky and precipitous. And the Muirs lay their eggs there. It's a nesting colony for all kinds of seabirds. So they are shaped pyriform like that, which allows them to sort of turn in a little circle and not go crashing down if they roll. And this is something that is amazing about evolution, that forms of life are adapted to their function. And that's a very critical thing about why we observe and make observations of life forms, which is what citizen scientists in the biology realm do. And, citizen science is a lot of different things. I've been solicited by, I think, UCSF to join a citizen scientist project to track COVID. So citizen science is really mob sourcing data collection, but my citizen science is all about biodiversity, and my talk today is about biodiversity. So I'm bringing up The Spine of the Continent, which is my previous book, my citizen science book, partly because it inspired me to write the citizen science book, but also because it's very relevant right at this moment in time. So The Spine of the Continent, when I was at the Academy of Sciences researching the book on evolution, I just kept hearing from scientists, there's this mass extinction going on. We're losing biodiversity. It's a disaster. It's an emergency. And that was in like 2007 and 8. And we are well aware of this now, commonly, I think, as a culture, but that was not the case in that time. So I was kind of going like, what are they talking about? I have to figure out what they're talking about. And then when I learn about it, find a good story to tell people about it, an inspiring story, so that people will want to read the book. So I did. I found this great story, The Spine of the Continent. And the spine of the continent is the Rockies, basically, from, you can see all the way down the whole continent of North America, transboundary, Canada, the United States, and Mexico. And truly, this mountain range goes all the way down in the Andes, we're called the Andes, down in South America, and is a foundational structure of our continent. Sometimes the spine of the continent is called a biotic conveyor belt because so many species live on it and in it. The historical species that we no longer have in California, like grizzly bears and wolves, there might be a wolf somewhere up in North California. I hope so, but I'm not sure that's true. But they still live in the northern part of the spine of the continent. So this intact ecology is still going on in the northern part of the spine of the continent. So the spine of the continent explains conservation biology and how we know what's going on in nature is going on in terms of extinction. How do we know this crisis is going on? A problem that ecology had in the early part of the last century, the 20s and 30s and 40s, is that hard sciences did not take it seriously. Hard sciences were chemistry, physics, and in the natural sciences world, geology, realms that could be quantified or made into math so they could be tested over and over again. So down here in this photo, you see the older man is E.O. Wilson. Many of you probably know who he is. He's one of the most, probably with Neil deGrasse Tyson, the second most famous living scientist we have today in the United States. And above him is Robert Macarthur, who died quite young. But in the 60s, they set about correcting this. They set about creating a theory that could be tested mathematically to determine how nature works in terms of extinction. So just tacking back for 1 second to Darwin and to evidence of evolution, Darwin was mostly asking how do new life forms come into being. But of course, extinction is the other side of that. And this is a little diagram that they used in their paper, which also became a book. And it is Cadiz County, Wisconsin, in these different years. And what you're seeing is in 1831, pretty much open space, natural areas. It doesn't mean people weren't living there, but it means that it wasn't built on, it wasn't built up. By 1950, it was so built up that there's just these tiny little remnants of natural areas. And the theory of island biogeography created a mathematical formula by which you could measure how fast species would go extinct based on the size of the islands, remnants, and how far away they are from each other. And this is super relevant because this is what all is happening around the world, around the whole earth. That is the fundamental, with climate change, the fundamental driver of extinction and with harming ecosystems. So in the spine of the continent, I wrote a long profile of Michael Soule, that's him there on the left, a good friend of Ed Wilson's, Jared Diamond's, Paul Ehrlich's. These are people whose names you know, perhaps. Michael died last June, and he was a really intense and also lovely person who contributed a lot of foundational science to this burgeoning field of conservation biology. It was known as the father of conservation biology, although he said, I'd like to be known as the mother of conservation biology. And one of the main tenets of conservation biology is this island effect, that if you have all of this breaking up of natural areas, the species on those remnants will go extinct at a faster rate for a couple of reasons. One is they can't get to resources when they need to find new resources. They need to go too far to get new resources, something to eat, something to drink, shelter. They need to also mate with others of their own kind, but from different populations. Just like humans, we need to, we have prescriptions against having children with people who are too closely related to us, basically because of inbreeding. And so this happens to animals too, and animals get inbred. So what Michael Soule did that was extraordinary really is he took the hard science and he said, I'm going to apply this on the ground. I am going to, with other people, with many other people, we're going to protect these places that are critical habitat that would link up natural areas to help species move more freely through the environment, to help them do what they need to do in terms of mating and finding resources. And then life histories of different species also occur over vastly different spatial distances. And so even a place like Yellowstone National Park is actually not big enough for some of the species that live there. And why am I telling you this today? Well, I'm telling you this today because, first of all, citizen science is a critical part of supporting the Spine of the Continent initiative and others like it. And also because the thinking behind it is the thinking behind Biden's, our President Joe Biden's environmental platform, his global deal for nature, he is proposing 30 by 30, that 30% of the United States be protected by 2030. This is part of his climate change plan. And the development of this 30 by 30 idea comes originally from initiatives like the Spine of the Continent and that thinking, very, very much refined by especially E. Dinerstein here. That's Eric Dinerstein, really a scientist who really has codified and worked hard to make into math, basically, why and where places should be protected. And then E.O. Wilson also contributed hugely to this idea with his Half Earth project. So he said 50% needs to be saved. It's gotten to be 30% because that's what always happens with nature, right? It's always going to be less than we want it to be. But yet the principle behind this connectivity is from the Spine of the Continent. Where should that protection be? This is where citizen science comes in. So just to point out to you this map, the Western Wildway, there is the Spine of the Continent, the boreal forest. This is the forests of Canada and up into the Arctic, the Appalachian Valley, sometimes called the Eastern Wildway. And then the longleaf pine is another big chunk of connectivity. This is, being unfurled right now. 30 by 30 US lands and oceans to be protected by 2030. Protecting 30% of the US by 2030 would require 440 million more acres to be set aside. So where should those acres be? Because they're not all equal, right? They're not all useful for biodiversity. There's the Western Wildway, another map of it. Here's the Eastern Wildway, a particular kind of map of it that shows the dark green is where there's still a lot of wilderness or natural areas that aren't built on. And then the lighter green areas are places that could potentially be bridges from one to the next. Doesn't mean that we don't have human interactions, not at all. This all accommodates human intertwining with nature, and that's very important. But still, we have to preference certain spaces. So this map I'm showing you because see that little Pacific arrow there on the left. And the Wildlands Network, which is one of the leaders of this whole concept, has been for years trying to establish a Pacific Wildway initiative. And one of these days that will happen. But it is to tell you that in Los Altos and in Santa Clara County and where I am in San Francisco, we are actually part of the Pacific Wildway. So this is not just something that is occurring in this vast scale elsewhere. It is also something that is happening and relevant right where we are, and we can participate in helping. So to try to put this into a little bit closer perspective for us, here's a shot I took of from Google Earth today. So here's the Los Altos History Museum right there. You can see that it is, in what is basically a very, very highly developed, unnatural part of the Bay Area. And you can see that we are very blessed. Indeed, we are so hugely blessed to have all of this natural area around our dense human habitation. And it's such a wonderful place to live here for many reasons, not for everybody and not always, but it is a beautiful place, largely because of these natural areas and the very special environment that we live in California and near the coast. And then to pull out a little bit so you can get a different perspective there, the red marker is the Los Altos Museum of Natural History. And then you can see that this is the Central Valley right in here. We've got these mountain ranges, and then of course the gigantic Rocky Mountain ranges. And that connectivity issue is very close to home for us here and to you in Santa Clara Valley, at this Coyote Valley, which has been a highly contested place for decades. Developers always want to take over Coyote Valley and build houses on it because there's a scarcity of housing in Silicon Valley. But this is a very, very critical juncture between those natural areas. So this species need to get to other places. They find a pinch point, they find a bottleneck right in Coyote Valley and on Highway 17. And we need to work to allow them safe passage and protection, which will keep the health of the ecosystem, both on either side of it, healthy, because the species interact with the vegetation, and the species are the critical players on an ecosystem that keep it healthy. So over the years, this is kind of a wonky map of Coyote Valley's landscape linkage vision. So, just to take a second on this map, you see here all this dense human habitation, Coyote Creek, then you see some Fisher Creek and some greenery. And this is what scientists do. They try to figure out exactly what every little piece of earth is. And we need to also know what species are on every little piece of that earth and where are they going. So citizen scientists who capture photographs of animals and plants help create a database so that we can get a picture of species richness and identity in the places that we are trying to protect. So back again to I just put this in again to remind you that we have broken up habitat and we need to heal it in certain places in order for species to not go extinct at too fast of a rate. This Highway 17. It's been this long-standing effort to try to protect a passage across Highway 17 for wildlife, particularly for mountain lions. They're the top predator. One of the very fundamental parts of the spine of the continent and of conservation biology tells us that we need a top predator to keep the ecosystem healthy. And in California, again, we have no more wolves, we have no more grizzly bears, they're also top predators. We still have mountain lions and they get killed all the time crossing roads. So this is a critical thing for us to protect those mountain lions and their passage. And the science behind why we need the top predator is highly established. It's called the trophic cascade. Trophic means food and cascade means to fall. It's really a maintaining of the food web. But connectivity is not only for big mammals like mountain lions, it's also for tiny invertebrates like butterflies. This is the bay checker spot butterfly, and to the left is owl's clover, which is one of its host plants. And this is a butterfly that has gone locally extinct in many places. Populations have gone extinct, but we still have some remnant populations. Maybe remnant isn't the right word if there's any ecologists listening in. At Edgewood Preserve down the peninsula where you are, there are some bay checker spots, and at Coyote Valley there are bay checker spots. So it's a signal, it's a sign that you've got healthy ecosystems there when you have this butterfly able to have generation upon generation on these landscapes. This is Stu Weiss, who is largely responsible basically for really protecting that bay checker spot. And there he is at Coyote Valley. Now I'm tacking now to something historical. This is about fire. Fire, which we here in California are all too keenly aware of. Well, I'm talking about fire today for a couple of different reasons. One is because it does come into citizen science. Number two, because you're a natural history museum and you care about the past. And the past is an extremely important thing to know about when you're talking about ecology, because the past tells us, how did this ecosystem evolve? So what are the healthy components of the ecosystem that we can support today? And one of the reasons we are having such devastating wildfires in the West, you've probably read, is because Native Californians burned the landscape for thousands of years. And that low intensity burning was curtailed entirely when the Spanish came and enslaved coastal Indians and made them stop burning. Now, when Amy gave her land acknowledgement at the beginning of this talk, and she acknowledged that the Muwekma Ohlone were stewards of this land for generations, for thousands of years, a big part of their stewardship here was burning the landscape. So burning was a technique, a gardening technique or a farming technique. It was an amazing way to interact with the resources on the landscape, the plants and the animals, basically helping to manage their populations for human consumption and use without driving them extinct. And this is not the same story everywhere, all over the world or all over the country even. It is not the same story for all different kinds of Indian histories. California Indians are special. And I found out about this when I was researching my citizen science book, because one category of citizen science is basically co-created projects. So again, we're going back to not the scientist in the ivory tower, but the person on the ground with the questions, with the science, with the investigations. And the story that I tell in my book focuses on the Amamutsan people in the Santa Cruz Mountains and about a co-created project with PhD scientists to figure out exactly what the burning practices were, what the effects were, what plants were cultivated historically for use by the tribe, and what's their status today. So this is basically it's a kind of citizen science. And I went out with the Amamutsan go out and they remove invasive species and they cultivate and plant and garden basically some of the native plants of the Santa Cruz Mountains, and they are re-stewarding their ancient heritage. Now, I would like to just say we are all indigenous earthlings, and we all can feel connected to the land by also stewarding it. And of course, fire on the landscape is very contentious now because it's so dry and it's so hot. You can't really do controlled burning in the same way that historically it was able to be done. So that's, an ongoing issue. But fire on the landscape is a lot responsible for why we have the most incredible, amazing, and special wildflowers in California that are highlighted in just gorgeous photography by Rob Badger and Nita Winter in their book. And so these are when there's an expedition diary of when Portola's men were coming and looking for San Francisco and they didn't find it, and they were hosted by the Indians in Santa Cruz, what it is now called Santa Cruz. Father Juan Crespi was the note taker on board, and he just documented miles and miles of incredible wildflowers that have helped ecologists figure out what is the history of wildflowers in California. What is quote unquote native here and what is introduced. So it goes all the way back historically. All that information is hugely historic. This is Alice Eastwood. She was a huge botanist at the California Academy of Sciences, responsible for saving all of the specimens that were saved after the 05, 06, the '06 earthquake and fire. Alice Eastwood was a citizen scientist in a way. You couldn't get much more professional than her or much more brilliant than her, but she didn't even have a college degree. And this is a fun little visual that my friends at the Cal Academy made for me with Alice holding my book. And I have a hat that has flowers on it, and she is my role model because she was very independent minded. She was passionate. She was just did everything positively all the time and made really substantial contributions to what we know about California and botany. So you too can be like Alice Eastwood or participate in plant-related citizen science. And one way to do that is to be involved with the California Native Plant Society's Santa Clara Valley chapter. So this goes back to, these are amateurs. They're collecting instances of life, and they are creating herbarium specimens from them. And those herbarium specimens are getting stored. And this is exactly what happens in a museum. And this is how we know how we measure change to landscapes over time, is by having these points of reference. But we don't need to actually have the physical representation anymore of plants or animals to understand or to document where they are and where they're going. This is iNaturalist. It is an entry point for citizen science. You sign up for it on a computer, but use your phone essentially you put it on your phone as well. Take a photo, see the young woman taking a photo of a butterfly on a flower. Then she's hitting send and it's going into the database. And then she's getting help from the community to identify what is that? What kind of butterfly is that? Is it a fritillary? Is it a monarch? And then the crowd, there's an artificial intelligence function on the site, and it makes a guess. Sometimes it's wrong, but then people chime in and eventually agree that yes, this is a fritillary or a monarch. Very unclear in this charming illustration. And I really love this diagram. This is made by the iNaturalist folks. So again, over here on the left is a person, you or me, taking a picture. And what the app is collecting is what you saw, the picture of the butterfly, when you saw it, what the date was, what the time of day was. Evidence of what you saw, well, that's the photograph, and then where you saw it. And the where you saw it is the latitude and the longitude of your location. So over on the right, this kind of mind-boggling little part of this diagram has placed the observation in a little, I don't know, could I call it a matrix of space, time, taxonomy? So I find this very cosmic, actually. Cosmic in a very real sense, in a very physical and grounded sense. The object is the taxonomy. It's what the name of the thing is. And then the space and time is its occurrence, its presence, if you will. I find, I was brought up Catholic and had to go to church every Sunday. And I also went to, religious instruction. And in church, we would sit in pews and listen to the Mass. And on the altar was a cross with Jesus Christ on it, and he was dead. But the whole thing was, he's not dead. He's actually also alive. And we were asked to make an imaginative and emotional reach to experience his living self in space and time, despite the fact that he, as an individual, was dead. Now, I've thought about this for so long that I think about this as Jesus was a person. He didn't have children, but other people did have children. And plants and animals have generations that come after them that they're related to. And when you see one butterfly, you're not just seeing that one butterfly, right? That butterfly has been brought to you by millions of years of evolution. So over space and time comes that one moment. And if you think that what I just said was a bunch of gobbledygook, that's fine. This is our moment in space and time. It's pretty scary. It's urgent. We all really need to attend to this. It's an emergency. The insect apocalypse is here. More than 50% of insects have disappeared since 1970. Insects are dying and nobody knows how fast. Over and over again, it has been shown that the amount of insects that are extant today in North America and Europe are a fraction of what they were since 1970. That's not very long ago. We need insects to do everything. They pollinate, they create food for us to eat. They themselves are food for birds. So if you aren't that interested in insects, but you love birds, you need to help the insects because that's bird food. And then a lot of insects are decomposers. So they're working in the soil. They help to aerate the soil and to create a more efficient soil for storing carbon. They are a hugely important functioning part of life. So we need to help them. We can help them. You can help them. You can help them tomorrow or even tonight. How to avoid the insect apocalypse, how people in towns and cities can help. So back to that concept of those isolated pieces of fragmented habitat. Well, we all live in buildings, most of us, and we're part of fragmenting the habitat. But we also have, most of us, or some of us have access to some outdoor space. I live in the city in a flat. I've got a little deck and I've got pots on that deck filled with native plants that are good food for local bugs, for bees and butterflies and for birds. And that is what you can do. I'll come back to that in a minute. Here is the story of the monarch butterfly. It's really going down the tubes very quickly, the Western monarch. But we can still make a big effort to try to sustain its population by planting native milkweed in our backyards, or especially not using pesticides and herbicides on our yards or in our communities, and except when it is absolutely necessary, which sometimes it is. And then here are iNaturalist observations of monarchs, which helps to direct where are the monarchs, where are they going. We don't have full information about their travel plans. So we want to know where they are so we can provide food along the way. So we could all create a network. We could be the connectivity for insects. We can't really quite be the connectivity unless you live on a big farm, you have a lot of acreage, in which case I hope you allow mountain lions and coyotes on your property. But most of us don't live like that. But no matter where we are, even in a high rise in downtown San Francisco, you can actually help create habitat for insects. And this is something, iNaturalist is really fun to use. This was just me looking at observations of monarchs just in Marin County. You can zero in on other counties, you can zero in on your neighborhood, you can look at the whole nation, you can look at the whole country. And because people have been observing monarchs for decades and decades, and we have records of them, that's how we know a lot about their life history. So we know about monarchs because of citizen science. And this is the same case for a lot of bird species. A lot of biodiversity information comes from citizen science collected data. Today, the biggest source of biodiversity data in the world is citizen science collected data. Now, we need it day after day after day, because one of the things that's happening is something that we all feel, right? Spring is coming sooner. The weather is changing. It's drier and hotter here in California than it was, 20 years ago. When I take pictures of even the very same plant, kind of day after day after day, that is data that somebody can take and put on a spreadsheet that can compare when was that flower blooming this year relative to last year, the year before, the year before, how much rain was there this year relative to last year and the year before, what was the temperature this year and the year before. This is how we understand how biodiversity is changing as a result of climate change or for anything. So this week happens to be California Native Plant Week. And the California Native Plant Society has a full bench of resources to help anybody who wants to. It's online, it's free, get into what are the native plants, what should I plant, how do I do it, what's the right way, what are the right nurseries to go to. I really want to emphasize that one of the very big causes of the insect decline is the use of herbicides and pesticides. And it's very pernicious, because if you buy plants at one of the big box stores, it is likely that those plants are drenched in herbicides and pesticides, because those plants are bought from these big operations that are like industrial farming of nursery plants. I do, if you want to be an activist about that, that would be a great thing to do. And I would say, we want to not be confrontational in a horrible way. We want to just ask, were these, do you know? If you asked a manager at one of the box stores, have these plants been treated with herbicides and pesticides? They may not even know. But if you ask, and if you tell people that you care about native plants that do not have pesticides and herbicides drenching them, then that will give a signal to the marketplace. And that is a power that we have, is the signal to the marketplace. Shifting a little bit to another ecosystem, this is the California Academy of Sciences has a robust citizen science program. I've been a part of it for a long time. And I wrote about it in my book. I wrote a lot about California and about Native Americans and about all these different ecosystems, and basically how making observations about them is useful to understand them. A lot of interesting stories. I think human history is really intertwined with what's going on here. And all of the degradations that we have to nature have historical causes. In California, we can put a very strong marker down at when the Spanish came. We can put another big marker down at the gold rush. So Snapshot Cal Coast is a coastal effort. This occurs every year. This year it is June 11th to 30th. And if you can go to anywhere on the California coast and take lots of observations with iNaturalist of things that you find, you can go to the Cal Academy website and get all kinds of information about this. That's a huge way to participate in something that is very consequential science and is very much used by natural resource managers along the coast of the whole of the central coast here, essentially, to better manage the resources. And we have big problems along the coast and in the waters. Of course we do. We have big problems everywhere. This is what it kind of looks like on iNaturalist, people making observations, doing Snapshot Cal Coast. So that's fun, because if you look on the website, you can see some groups that you might, because I know a lot of the time people really want to do this with other people and feel like they're part of something else and have some instruction. And so now is actually a very good time to do that with some groups, and you can find that on the Cal Academy's website. Another thing I want to call your attention to is the California Biodiversity Initiative. And this is something that Governor Jerry Brown signed off on. And it's an investment in California biodiversity. I will not explain it all here, but you please go to the website and look at it. Sign on, you can just, it says citizen sign on all you really do is like sign on and say, I'm in favor of this. And it is very progressive. It is fantastic. It is along the lines of 30 by 30. And, we just have the most amazing biodiversity in California here. And this, we need to protect it. And this is a plan to protect it. But it needs, of course, public support. So I will leave this up for a minute or two. This is a list of some of the resources that I mentioned in my talk. I'm concluding my talk right now. And Amy's going to put these on the website of the museum, so you don't have to write them all down right now. Some of the ones that I didn't mention talking, the Santa Clara Valley Open Space Authority, Mid-Peninsula Open Space, and Peninsula Open Space Trust. These are all amazing organizations protecting the land, and also with a lot of volunteer opportunities to help achieve some of these goals of connectivity and wildlife support that I mentioned. Green Foothills also. The Xerxes Society down at the bottom is the world's biggest insect conservation organization. And there's a tremendous bench of resources and information on there. You can really look by practically your microclimate to get information about what kind of plants to plant and what kind of organizations are doing work in your area that you could contribute to. So I'm very happy to respond to any questions, and I will stop talking now.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Mary Ellen. That was so great. It was a lot of really good information for somebody like me that's pretty new to this subject, and maybe some of our attendees as well. So we will start the questions. We have a good one here from Liz Nyberg. Do butterflies and insects actually find your patio in the midst of San Francisco?
Some of them do. Yes, they do. So, it's really, I live kind of close to the Presidio, like probably 5 blocks away. And there's a lot of backyards where I am. I don't really have one, but other people do. And so that's all habitat. They do definitely find the habitat. One thing is to not be too neat and clean about your backyard, actually, because they caterpillars like to hide in leaf litter, and that's kind of shelter and food for caterpillars over the course of the winter, or when they're going through their phases. We had this huge construction project in the house next door to us, and they put in this kind of, I'm looking at it out the window, this kind of wall of palm trees. They're not quite trees. And I thought, what on earth are they doing that for? But I'm so glad they did, because now I've got 2 hummingbirds are nesting in those palm trees, and they come zipping over to my little deck all the time, look in my window at me when I'm working. So yeah, they do.
That's great. That's great. Another question related to butterflies. This is from Marcia. Is this year's decline in the butterflies coming to Pacific Grove a one-time thing, or do you believe it will continue?
Oh, it's not a one-time thing. It's been going on for years, and it's just gotten worse and worse. I mean, I wrote a piece for the New York Times, but 2 years ago, I had gone out on the Monarch count for the overwintering sites in Bolinas and Stinson, and that's another site down in Pacific Grove where typically the butterflies would overwinter. And that year we count, the whole count for California was 30,000 butterflies, which was right on the verge of extinction, right? Because of that concept of you need a certain number of individuals to be genetically healthy. And this year there were the same, I didn't do the counts this year, but they counted 200 butterflies. That I have a question, is that already functionally extinct? The people that are very involved with monarchs say, we can get them back, we can support them. One of the interesting things is that, by planting milkweed for them, so monarchs, my TED talk, by the way, which I think is on my website, or you can find it on YouTube, which was from 2 years ago or a year and a half ago, is about the monarch migration and what we know about it. And it's possible that we can create enough habitat and protect enough habitat to encourage them to come back or to support what we've got left. But they may be a victim of climate change and habitat loss, pesticides and herbicides. That may be just happening.
Thank you. This is from Elizabeth. Are there towns in the Bay Area that are trying specifically to create wildways?
I don't know if it's by town. There's definitely, like here in San Francisco, there's a little nonprofit called Nature in the City, and it has created a corridor in the sunset for the green hairstreak butterfly. So what happened there, and if you go to Nature in the City, you can actually, if you get to the city, they are flying right now. These green hair streaks are the most incredibly beautiful little butterflies. And they only fly for like a month a year and only in this place. Like they're very, very local butterflies. So what happened is, when San Francisco was built, the habitat for butterflies like the green hair streak was built on. But there were some rocky outcrops that were so hard to build on that they weren't built on. And so this Nature in the City has planted the native plants that the green hairstreak likes in these staircases, basically in the sunset. And there's a little map of them on that website. But right now you could go and see some green hairstreaks. And butterflies like it sunny and they don't like the wind typically. So good times to see them are usually like 11 to 1. They do go hilltopping sometimes, and they do that later in the day on hot days. So if it's windy, don't bother looking for them, or if it's cold. But right now, I went out a couple of days hunting green hair streaks and had a most beautiful day about a week ago, and got a bunch of pictures of them, and they're just unbelievably beautiful. So the cities do try, and Facebook and Google campuses of that nature today are trying to be very eco-friendly and to create oases, habitat centers for species. So there are efforts. People are thinking regionally. There's something called Re-Oaking Silicon Valley, which is a project to connect basically fragmented landscapes right through Silicon Valley by planting oak trees. Oaks are an enormously incredible habitat supporter for not only butterflies, but all kinds of species. I think like 500 species live on oak trees. So if you've got enough land to plant trees, plant some oaks.
This question is from Gary. Gary volunteers with Greentown Los Altos to plant trees around town. What are your top tree picks?
Okay, so I am not a good botanist, although I did used to work for Friends of the Urban Forest. I do have to say that oaks are the top tree for our area. Urban trees are a whole other thing, right? You have to think about other considerations about what kind of tree species you plant on a street and in an urban area than if you have like a big backyard or an open space. So depending on the habitat, another fantastic tree for wildlife is buckeyes. But I don't know about buckeyes on city streets, right? Because they get very, very big, and then they have their big buckeyes that probably could fall and conk somebody on the head, but I don't know. I apologize. I wish I knew about every single living thing out there. And I try to learn all the time. But actually, there are good sources of information about good urban trees in the Bay Area. Friends of the Urban Forest is a good place to start.
Okay, awesome. Thank you. That's a great resource. So this one's on my mind. Can you talk to us a little bit about the name citizen science itself and when that phrase sort of came into being, the first people who started using that? And I'm just curious about, it's such an interesting way to frame it. Is it sort of changing our ideas about, what it means to be a good citizen, or what it means to be a good scientist even as well. Like, it's encouraging scientists to be more democratic and more in communication with the public. So I'm wondering if you could just talk about the name itself and sort of how it is, how it came to be, and how it's taking on a life of its own, maybe.
It's such an excellent question. Thank you. And all of your questions are really excellent. This is a great one. When I was researching my book, there was a book that came out, a couple decades ago, and I can't remember who wrote it, called Citizen Scientist. And it was a writer who was kind of advocating against this kind of separation of science from the rest of life, and was also kind of a social justice issue of, you don't leave all the questions to the scientists. Like, you have your own questions. And science is not, there is specialized science that really only a PhD can do, but a lot of it is something we can all do. One evolutionary biologist said to me, if your car won't start and you like open the hood and you sort of try to figure out what's wrong, you're being a scientist. You're looking at what is the cause of something, how does something work, what is the thing that might do what we want it to do. But I would say, when I was writing The Spine of the Continent, which I was writing, it came out in 2012, I was asking myself what's working to save nature. And when I wrote a little spreadsheet for myself of projects that were having measurable outcomes, concrete outcomes, not just aspiration, but actually we passed a law, we protected a species, we protected an ecosystem. I saw that they all had this component, and the component was that regular people contributed to collecting data on behalf of whatever the initiative was. Only one of the projects at that time had the word citizen in it, and that was Citizen Tracker down in Arizona. But I started, researching this idea and saw this term, citizen science, starting to come up. eBird, which is the mother of all citizen science, much, much bigger than iNaturalist. And they probably have been using that term for a long time. Aldo Leopold, who is kind of one of the patron saints of conservation and was a wonderful, amazing figure in conservation history, wrote a book called the Sand County Almanac, which I highly recommend, with Silent Spring. Those are kind of the two Bibles, really, of books that really hold up with time, beautifully written, really carefully thought out about how those books unfold. And Aldo Leopold in this book calls for us to be plain members and citizens of the earth. And I think that is really the spirit of citizen science, that it's against this hierarchical, there's better, that humans are at the top of some heap and that we have the right to destroy everything below us. Plain members and citizens. So it is a term that has grown and the other thing that happened while I was even researching citizen scientist is that it started to boom as its own kind of practice area. I would say even now more in the educational realm than in the hard science realm, although that's also changing. And a lot of that really is a result of smartphone technology. A person who was instrumental in starting a citizen science platform for government agencies, citsci.gov. All of the federal agencies participate in this to some degree, although they do it unofficially. So the people that work for all the agencies, Department of Transportation, Agriculture, they participate, but they do as individuals. So that when you get an administration that is not amenable to protecting the environment, that it doesn't just get defunded, and it's something that exists independently of the government. But they told me that they really saw that when Hurricane Katrina was going on in New Orleans, that first responders were using smartphone and mapping technology to track getting where did people need what kind of help? Where did somebody need to be evacuated? Where did you need a doctor? Where did you need food? delivered the food there, now go there. People in real time using this living map. And there is a whole world of citizen mapping that is really converges with citizen science. So this is really how it functions right now. But your question also opens the door for me to mention a conflict that a lot of people have found with the term citizen scientist. And this really came up in the last administration, where a lot of people felt like the word citizen was an exclusive term, that only if you were a citizen of the United States were you welcome to participate. And so a lot of agencies and groups opted to use the word community science instead of citizen science. I don't care what anybody calls it. I want them to just do it. But I will say that the term community misses something to me that the term citizen scientist has. When you make an observation on iNaturalist, you are helping, local people figure out how to manage a resource better, whether it's in the ocean or in a forest or a park. But you are also providing data to scientists all over the world, because it becomes part of a global bioinformation data facility. And this to me captures something very important about our moment in time. We are individuals, we are one person, but we are also all in this together. And I think citizen science really expresses the global imperative of putting our hands together, our hearts together, our heads together. And I actually find the word community a little bit constrictive, like it's just a very local thing. But I would never, ever stamp my little feet about that, because whatever people want to call it is fine, just do it.
That's a great answer. Citizens of the world, right?
Citizens of the world.
Yeah. Well, it makes me think about, you brought up a lot of, iNaturalist, a lot of the apps that people are using. And this was another thing that sort of struck me. And it's more of a comment than a question, so I'm just going to bring it up. And I'm not sure what the question is, but it's so interesting because often we talk about nature and tech as just diametrically opposed to each other. They're so in opposition. So it's really, it's sort of counterintuitive that, one part of, or, there's lots of different ways you can do citizen science, but if you're using these apps, one part of it is asking you to go out and be in nature, be present in it, observe, pay attention, experience nature. And the other part is asking you, be on your phone, be looking at your screen, be using technology. And we sort of have gotten into this therapeutic mindset of let's go to nature to get away from our computers and our tech. So I think there's a question in there somewhere. I'm just going to kind of throw that contradiction out there and see if, from your own experience, has that sort of been a challenge for you as a citizen scientist, or is it sort of helping you balance this relationship between nature and tech?
I'm so glad that you brought this up, actually, because I really just in the last couple of weeks was really thinking about that hard, because people always ask me that, like, I don't want to use my phone out in nature. I just want to relax out in nature. I just want to be out in nature. And I always say, well, that's fine. Just, try to make your observations at one point while you're on your hike, and then put your phone away. And then, take the rest of the hike without making observations. But then the other day, right now is such a great time to be out on any open space. There's incredible things blooming and happening out there. And I was out on Mount Tam clicking away, and I was so excited because I was seeing all of these different native wildflowers that they won't be there for very long. And I'm like, oh, I got this and I got that. And I thought, actually, I really challenge the idea that using iNaturalist in nature takes you away from it. I actually challenge people to think about, do you really get to go out in nature and not think about it? Do you really get to just use it that way? Like it's doing something for you that's lovely? Granted, it does do a lot for you that's lovely, but shouldn't we give back to nature as well? And when I have my phone to do some iNaturalist, I'm really paying attention because I'm looking for things. And one of the ways to get into iNaturalist is to actually choose a species or a taxon of some kind that you are super interested in. And for me, that's been seabirds. I've taken a lot of bad pictures of seabirds at Crissy Field because they're hard to get on the phone. You can also take pictures on a camera and then upload them to iNaturalist, which is kind of, you get better pictures that way. Those seabirds have taught me so much about seasons. They've helped me calibrate my own relationship with time and place and the moment, because sometimes, the pelicans will be here in the summer, and then, the snowy plovers were hatching their little eggs just a few weeks ago, and, they live cyclically. They're full of these superpowers, as my friend Megan Prellinger says. Some of these tiny birds, they migrate, from Alaska to South America. Some of them don't touch the water, they don't touch land. They just have the most amazing abilities. And so me documenting them, I've learned a lot about seabirds. And then there's a particular coast Indian paintbrush that I take pictures of whenever I see it. And paintbrushes, you've probably all seen some species of them. They grow a lot of places. And I'm also learning about, well, where am I going to see this species and where am I going to see that? They're different species of the same plant. So I focus on those and I learn from that, and I love that. I always pick up a thread with that. But then whenever I see something different, I'm happy to see that too. So I do wonder, do you really think that it's okay to just go out into nature and not think about it? I don't think that's fair anymore.
Yeah, a different reason for going out into nature then. Yeah, great answer. Thank you so much. I have two questions from Marcia, and one of them, she's wondering about the book that you mentioned. This was 2 questions ago. That was one of the 2 Bibles in the field besides Silent Spring. Could you say the name of that book again, and I'll put it in the chat for her.
So Silent Spring by Rachel Carson, and then A Sand County Almanac by Aldo Leopold. And Aldo Leopold is an important historical figure in conservation. He was a game warden and a hunter. And then he had a realization about the top predator, about killing wolves. He used to go wolf killing. And then he said, oh no, I think I'm doing the wrong thing here. When the wolf is not on the mountain, it starts to degrade. And A Sand County Almanac is an interesting book because it's a year, he does it over the course of a year. And so it automatically, just having that kind of framework, really reminds the reader when you're reading it that there's a seasonality, there's a time, there's a place and time for all of us. There's generations that come before us, there's generations that come after us. And it's about observation in a very deep way.
Thank you. That book title is now in the chat for anybody interested. And this is also from Marcia. I love this question. Thank you for asking it, Marcia. Can you share some success stories of species that have recovered after being near extinction, like sea otters?
Yes, there are some. Well, first of all, pelicans and peregrine falcons. And, that's a citizen science story. That's a Silent Spring story. So Rachel Carson, noticing that she's putting two and two together about DDT use, and that spraying DDT all over crops was actually having this impact on other parts of the ecosystem. Part of how she figured that out was looking at data from Hawk Mountain in New Jersey. So probably my best written chapter in my book, Citizen Scientist, is the last one, which is about the hawk watch. And I did that hawk watch for 6 years. That goes on here in Marin. But there's a much bigger hawk migration that goes through New Jersey and has collected data on hawks, observances of hawks year after year after year, for I think 100 years. And she looked at the list and saw that this gigantic downturn in peregrine falcons. And then the peregrine falcon people got into it, and a lot of people figured out that the DDT was making the shells of the peregrine falcon too thin. And so they were unable to have birth because the babies, the fledglings couldn't survive. And then getting the DDT out helped bring back the peregrine falcon. That also is the similar story to pelicans here, California brown pelican. So they've come back, and butterflies, the Karner blue butterfly is a butterfly that has been protected and is still threatened, but holding on pretty well. And that is a butterfly that's an East Coast butterfly, but related to blues that we have here. The trouble, with the sea otters have come back to a certain extent, but just a fraction of their historical population. And the trouble is that you need kind of certain amounts of certain species to have the same kind of ecological impact. Anyway, but people are making a big effort for the sea otters, which is good. When people make an effort, it tends to work. This is one of the sad things about the monarch. It may not work, but we're going to try hard. People are still really trying hard.
Thank you. This question is from Gil. Seems like much of citizen science revolves around data collection. What are some ways students can learn from participating in citizen science?
Well, I have the big definition of citizen science. I mean, there's data collection. There's also, I think I had a slide in there. There's places where all of these sources where you contribute data, by the way, like eBird, iNaturalist. There's something called Nature's Notebook, which is about phenology and focused more on plants. They all make the data completely available, so you can use the data yourself. You aren't necessarily only contributing to other people's scientific questions. You can ask your own and do your own questions. You don't want to figure out, you want to use somebody else's way of collecting the data though, because that's been very highly developed to be useful no matter who's using it. But I think that restoration work, learning how to garden, how to plant, what is a native plant, what is an invasive plant, what is an exotic plant that isn't native to the area but doesn't hurt anything. But so working with all of these open space organizations and parks need help in pulling destructive invasives out and planting healthy native plants. I think kids learn a lot from doing that, and they like doing that. It's fun physical work. There are online things that are just kind of pure data, still can be kind of fun. There's a lot of work currently, though maybe this will change, of camera trap images that need human eyes to identify what they are. So you can sometimes do that from the comfort of your own home through a platform called Zooniverse. Zooniverse has many, many projects on it, not all to do with biodiversity, but basically they are places for you to contribute your labor to identify what's in photographs. The Flint water story, if you remember, that's still going on. That's a citizen science story where these women said our kids are getting poisoned by the water, and the city official said, "Oh no, you're making it up. They're just not that bright." And the women got really mad, and they got themselves a scientist who helped them create a protocol basically for collecting data. They had the question. Their question was, is there lead in the water harming our children? And basically they had to prove it, and they did. They collected the data, but they also came up with the question. That's the co-creation project. That's where the community, you could call that community science, where the community has a pressing issue. And then, usually gets the help of a PhD scientist to help design a protocol to help answer it, and to also create hard and fast data that holds up in court.
Thank you, that's great. This is from Liz. Liz is mentioning that she's reading Walden right now, and she is very much in love with Henry David Thoreau. He's sounds like it's that he might be your citizen science hero, Liz. She's reading Walden right now, and he observed everything: the ice, the water, the woods, the insects, etc. And it makes me wonder, Mary Ellen, about if you have any citizen science hero. I'm sure you have a lot of probably citizen science heroes. If you had to pick one, I know you mentioned Alice Eastwood as one, or is it sort of, changing your idea of what a scientific hero is, and what scientific contributions qualify as heroic now with this new type of science?
Thank you for the question. I think, what I think about most of the time is, really just is trying to understand ecology better myself. And so I think more about species than about the people and the ecosystems. But I'm also really fascinated by the tools of perception. So by the way that we can see what's happening in nature. So that is through data and through photographs, through satellites, through all kinds of different ways. One hero of mine is profiled in my citizen science book, Sam Droghi. And Sam is the most amazing person. He is a USGS scientist, US Geological Survey scientist for many, many years. He's about my age, has, so 60 something, been doing citizen science. And he inherited, I think it was the breeding bird survey from Chan Roberts, who established it. So he's saved databases that are incredibly important. And he has invented many, many citizen science projects and ideas, including the Bioblitz, which people may have heard of. So a Bioblitz is will be a 1 day, usually, or even 4 hours, where a group is asked to go and document all the biodiversity you see in a single place, like a park. And that is really useful, helpful information to the people who manage that park. And Sam invented the Bioblitz. And he said, we needed to inventory a park, and we didn't have enough scientists to do it. So we thought we'd make an event out of it and just, offer coffee and make it fun. So they did. And the Bioblitz has become a staple of how communities and organizations, the National Park Service had Bioblitzes of hundreds of national parks for their anniversary in 2016. But here's something that Sam Droghi said that I think is really brilliant. He said, if Thomas Edison hadn't existed, there would still be electricity on in the room that you're in. We would still have lights on overhead, because that technology and that idea was in the air and a lot of people were working on it. He managed, and it's an interesting story, right, how to be the person who gets credit for it. But when you are out, like when I am out on Mount Tam on last Friday at 8 o'clock in the morning, taking a picture of a blue dick or of a Douglas iris, that moment in time will never come again. That observation can never be made again. Only I could make that observation at that time because I was there. So the specificity of being there and of making the observation of the taxon, when I was, talking about that little diagram of space-time taxon, that moment is the moment of importance. And I think this really gets to, we've had a world of hierarchy, of famous people, of people who get credit, of people who get all of the riches, of people who feel superior to others. And we're really trying to dismantle that, right? Citizen science is a tool for dismantling it. And also, I think, a way for me to feel, hey, I'm doing something really important. I'm making this observation. I am present in this moment to this landscape and to this plant. And this moment will never come again. So it's unique and invaluable.
That's such a wonderful answer. Thank you for that. Yeah, it's so interesting. I mean, that trend is happening in a lot of different fields in history and museums as well. We're trying to, dismantle the histories that are just about the the people, the big names that we're used to, and really, what are these stories of ordinary people that defined their lives and the lives of their communities that we may not have heard about. And it makes me think too, one of the things that struck me about your book is that you did such a wonderful job of sort of exploring how, citizen science, it's very much about objectivity, but it's also really about storytelling and being in that moment and the story that you can tell, as you just showed for us. And so I'm wondering if you can talk about storytelling in your own work, and how that comes through, and how it's important for you in your work in raising awareness for endangered species and extinction.
Thank you for that question. And yes, storytelling is, there was a time when I was going through a little phase of kind of resisting storytelling because it is a beginning, a middle, and an end. And so there's a sort of a narrative structure that I wonder if it's useful. I've kind of come around to thinking it is very useful. So in my book, I did talk about Joseph Campbell quite a bit, who was a citizen scientist of a sort, but he participated in our understanding of the tide pools off the coast, which is why he's in there. But Joseph Campbell, his whole thing was called The Hero of a Thousand Faces, and his idea was that all world mythologies, all religions, and all like ancient mythologies, storytelling, all have the same essential story, which he called the hero's journey. And basically the hero goes out, the hero has a conflict, doesn't feel like is in a bad place. There's a call to action. The hero has adventures and gets help, goes through something that is like a death, and then survives in a different way, is transformed, and brings back transformative information to his tribe. So actually, to just reference my own upbringing with Jesus on the cross, that is a hero's journey story. Yes, it tends to be all about men. And yes, probably all of world mythology has that in it because it's been very, very male-centric storytelling. So that's a big problem right there, right? But I keep thinking about Joseph Campbell and what is the essence of the story. And I think the essence of the story really is that the sun, it's actually really not about the hero. The hero is actually really the sun, because the sun instigates all life. We don't have life without the sun. The sun and its relationship to the earth creates photosynthesis, creates plant life. Nobody knows exactly how it started, but starts up, the plant uses the energy from the sun to create life. We do not have any life after plants, before plants, without that sunlight and without plant life. So then we have the seasons in the temperate environment, that we're in, which is above the equator, or if you're below the equator, where you have seasons, and that's a season of life and death, winter, spring, summer, and fall. So really the sun goes through a hero's journey around, right? The earth goes around the sun in a year. And I think that's really the heroic story that we do all really participate in, because we are all very much bounded by our human bodies, by the fact that we're born and we live, we need to eat, we need to drink water, we need to eliminate, we need shelter, and then we will die. And Joseph Campbell always said that the purpose of that story of the hero's journey is to put yourself in alignment with nature and to understand that you will die. But to go in alignment with nature, I don't think he pushed it. I think if he had lived longer, he would have understood this a little bit more. But in alignment with nature really is in alignment with ecology, with the birth and death cycles and interactions among all living beings, all biology, not just one species. And one species has our one story that dominates, right? And again, not so sure about that. But I will give you now chapter 2 in my answer to you, Amy, because it's also as a writer, and this is a piece of information that you should write this down and remember it if you write anything. And I learned this from a friend of mine who is an interpreter in a national park. And she had gone through this interpretation program in the National Park Service. There's turns out to be this incredible, academic field basically in how to interpret. Like when you go to Yosemite and someone in a big ranger hat is going to tell you a story about El Capitan, that person has been trained in interpretation. So there is a guru whose name I forget of interpretation, and this is what he told these people who were learning how to do it. When you are the ranger and you get a crowd of 50 people and you need to get their attention with your story, so you're going to tell them about El Capitan, but how do you get everybody's attention? Tell a story start out with a story that includes a birth, a death, falling in love, or a child. Like only one of those things or more than one. And everybody will start paying attention to you because they are stories to which we universally respond. Birth, death, love, a child. And that I find that to be just an incredible rule of thumb for helping to shape an effective story. And when I was writing Citizen Scientist, I mean, I didn't start out with what that was going to be for myself, but in the process of writing it, my father died, and it became part of the story for me. And it became, I think, something that a reader can connect with on a very human level that then may hopefully create an opening for some of the new information I'm trying to bring in that may not be as familiar, that you may not be able to empathize with immediately, although most people will empathize with her father died. So that is very practically, I think, and I think that it's really worth doing that to try to bring new information to people by creating a sense of empathy. I also think if you can be funny, that's always really helpful. Even just amusing is helpful.
Well, you managed all of those things in your book, so and it worked so well. And it's just, I didn't mention this in your bio, but for those of you who haven't already Googled Mary Ellen Hannibal during this talk, you have a background in literature, and so I love that you've been able to sort of marry these two passions in your life. And I think that sometimes we think of them as so disparate, but they're not in a lot of ways. And so I love that you've been able to bring them both together. So thank you for that wonderful answer. I want to end because we just have a few minutes left here, but today is Earth Day. And so I'm super excited that I got to spend it with you and with everybody that showed up tonight, that we got to celebrate our beautiful planet doing this talk. So I just wanted to wrap up, and I'm hoping that you can leave us with a message of hope. And you've left us with several already, but I'm wondering if there's one sort of final message that you want to leave us with, when you think about the planet and the future of our planet. What has you feeling hopeful today?
Well, Michael Soule, who I wrote about in The Spine of the Continent, he was always be asked that question, like, what do you think? Are we goners, or are we okay, or what? And he would say, well, I'm not an optimist, but I'm a possibilist. And I would say, okay, I'm a possibilist. One thing, there's a couple of things that are very exciting about our moment in time. It is a moment of awakening. It is a moment of awareness. It's actually, I think, a moment out of breaking out of that hero's journey, that it's not about the human alone, that it's about the whole cycle of life. And we actually really need to know that in order for us to survive. We are also super lucky that even though we have these vast reductions in biodiversity, it's still out there now. It's there, and we can see it. Right now is such a good time to go hiking or just go outside, and there's so much crack-a-lacking out there on the hillsides. It's unbelievable. The birds, the butterflies, I haven't seen that many yet this season, but they'll start, more and more coming. And it's there, it's life, it's still there. And oh my gosh, we can really have a revelation about what we're doing here when it turns around and we don't, as the Mwekma Ohlone stewarded this earth, we now are called upon to also steward the earth. We want to be more like them, don't we? We want to be more one with the life of the earth, the way they established. And we can. And we can do it with a smartphone. We can do it in different ways. It's a different time. But I think that is very exciting. And then, you do see with the coronavirus something that is positive, I think, that comes from it, which is, first of all, the lesson that something that is biologically a result of mistreating nature can stop the world economy. And I think that got the attention of people who don't care about nature, but they just care about the world economy. They don't want it to stop again. So maybe they'll take care of nature better. I hope they will. The other thing is all this vaccinating going on. I mean, we are really vaccinating billions of people. We are cooperating around the globe. So that makes me feel like we can do this. We can do this.
Thank you. That's such a great message to end on. So I want to just thank you so much, Mary Ellen, for this wonderful talk and for being with us tonight. And for all of you who attended, thank you so much for coming. No, I almost said for coming out, for staying in and being on Zoom and being with us tonight and celebrating Earth Day together. I want to remind everybody that we do have a couple more programs coming up. You can watch this one. This recording will be online probably tomorrow. And then we have a couple more that are also related to the same exhibit, the Beauty and the Beast exhibit. On May 26th, Gardening with Native Plants, co-hosted with Grassroots Ecology. And on June 24th, Los Altos Goes Green, which we're co-hosting with Greentown Los Altos. So I hope you'll also tune out to those as well. But thank you everybody so much. And Mary Ellen, thank you again. This was a wonderful conversation.
Thank you, Amy. Super, super fun. And happy Earth Day to everybody.
Happy Earth Day. Thank you. Take care, everybody.
Ciao.
Night.